Okay, I'm going to invite our panelists up. We have Tina Quigley, who is the General Manager of Regional Transportation of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. And one of the things I learned researching this is Tina has the best scope of service of any public agency in the country that I can think of. She has public transit, traffic management, roadway design, construction funding and planning. And so I, as the City of Seattle DOT Director, get to deal with roadway design, construction, and funding. I don't get to run and traffic management. I don't.
Well, you're welcome to come join us.
Oh no, I do get to. I don't get to run the public transit. We have Brad Stertz, who's the Director of Audi Government Affairs. He represents Audi in DC on issues including automated vehicle testing and deployment, EV charging infrastructure, connected vehicles, safety, and cybersecurity. And then we have Kyle Ova, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for Traffic Technology Services, and it's an information provider for connected and connected vehicle applications. So the reason why this panel is important is last year we actually saw the biggest increase in traffic deaths since 1964, a 35% increase in traffic deaths in Los Angeles here. And so Tina and I, we are sort of on opposite ends of the spectrums in terms of what our cities look and feel like and how people get around.
Our cultures are very different.
Our cultures are very different. So in Seattle, we have about 80% of the people are getting around, getting to work, walking, biking, or taking transit. And I suspect in Las Vegas, it's almost the inverse.
It is. Your pyramid is reversed to my pyramid.
Yeah.
Mine goes cars, maybe pedestrians, bikes every now and then, transit. Yours is like...
We're pedestrians, then bikes, then transit, and then cars. But the interesting thing is we're both really rapidly growing cities. And the fact is we need to squeeze as much capacity out of our infrastructure as we can. She's trying to move as many vehicles, as many cars as she can, and I'm trying to move as many buses as I can. But we're both trying to do it while making our cities safe. And the more people you try to put into an environment, the harder it is to keep everybody safe. So I just wanted to open the conversation with, tell us, and you guys are all working together in Las Vegas, helping roll out autonomous and connected vehicles. So tell me a little bit about the evolution that you guys are seeing in Las Vegas from starting, where we are now with connected vehicles, moving to an autonomous future. Tell me about kind of some of the things that you guys are looking at now.
Well, I'll sort of started in a larger framework, and that is, I think we have actually an incredibly exciting and historic opportunity to really focus now on how these technologies fit into where the rubber literally hits the road in cities, to work with pedestrians and, as you say, get people in and out and move them from point A to point B very efficiently. In the past, when the automobile burst on the scene, we didn't have that opportunity. The car was just there, and it kind of took over. And now I think we have this period over the next decade where we can really think through how that's going to work to achieve all the goals that we've been talking about today.
We love to talk about autonomous vehicles and what the world's going to look like when autonomous vehicles come and how it's going to change urban design and movement and our mobility choices, and I do look forward to that. But I have to tell you right now, it's these baby steps, these very tangible baby steps of not just making the car smarter, but making the driver smarter that is really going to make a difference and gets us excited. And we do have a very important partnership right now between the three of us in Las Vegas. And if I could just share real quickly what it is that right now we do have the ability for our traffic lights to talk to newer model Audis that have Audi Prime subscription service on them, so that the drivers of those vehicles know how many more seconds before that light is going to turn green. And I know that sounds like a very small baby kind of step or just a nice amenity, but a couple things. One is this technology, this amenity will alert the driver 4 seconds before the light actually does turn green. So that means that a driver has the time to pick up the baby's bottle or take a bite of the sandwich, check their texts, because we all know they're going to do that. But that alarm tells the driver, head in the game, this light's going to turn green. And the more cars that we can get through that traffic cycle, that green light cycle, adds capacity, without even having to build any more asphalt or more traffic signals. We've just increased the capacity just by making the driver smarter and that much more alert. So it's things like that I'm so excited to see auto manufacturers starting to embrace these types of technologies that are baby steps, but make the drivers smarter as to how they use our infrastructure.
So
Well, just to add to that, then, the time to green functionality of Audi Connect is the first step, as you mentioned, but it does go further into safety aspects. So through this type of delivery, we know that we can do things like red light running, pedestrian awareness, and we're working on those next steps, which are other connected vehicle applications within the vehicles.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What are some of those other? What are some of the other things cities should be thinking about from a connected vehicle? So I spend a lot of time focused on pedestrians and improving pedestrian safety, but I've also been the driver that. When you're checking your phone, you're actually using your peripheral vision to see when the car next to you is moving versus when the green is going. And so I have rear-ended people in that way, which causes congestion, creates a safety issue.
Yes.
What are some of the other features that I might not be thinking about or other folks in the room might not be thinking about in addition to that time to green that are going to have an impact on pedestrian or on safety generally?
Well, these guys get all the credit, but I get so excited about the work that they're doing because as they advance this technology, the next step in this progression of baby steps is going to be to tell the driver what speed you need to be going in order to catch the next wave of green lights or stay within what we call the wave of green lights, because then we set up the synchronization cycles to ideally give a green light wave when you are driving the speed limit. And that, again, I think makes a much smarter driver. You're much more rational. You have that information, so you don't need to be swerving and changing lanes and speeding and stepping on the gas and braking. You're just that much more relaxed and alert as to what is going on.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the great opportunities is to reduce congestion, and that's what we're talking about. And if you reduce congestion, it achieves some of the emissions goals that a lot of cities have, better quality of life, of course. But to some of the speakers earlier, it makes mobility as a service more viable. Yeah. When you're not having a bunch of cars just sort of clustered and stalled around stoplights or different points of a city, but the traffic flow is pretty smooth, that helps it out a lot. And really what we're talking about is a system that really gives the vehicle a much greater field of vision of the environment throughout blocks of a city rather than just kind of what's in the nearby streets or what they can see with their sensors or, in our case, eyeballs.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talked a little bit about this in advance of the call or in advance of this panel, but one of the things about the airline industry that I think is really interesting is that they share safety information. As a way to make the entire industry safer. And you mentioned mobility as a service, and so automakers are going to, I think, are going to kind of morph from just selling the vehicle to also potentially operating it or working with people that operate it.
Right.
How does that change the way we think about safety features in automobiles? Are they still a competitive advantage, or is it something that benefits the whole industry?
Well, if you asked former NHTSA administrator Mark Rosekind, he would have said the airlines don't sell themselves on their safety record, they sell themselves on service. And I think there's a lot of discussions going on now in terms of data sharing to help the whole industry understand the different edge cases that could occur in a city. I think that's a whole different dynamic because you have a fewer number of aircraft makers and airlines. But I think there's some movement towards getting to that where there is a sharing and safety becomes something that we all work on together.
The concepts are all very similar. So if you're going to provide a speed recommendation, it's the same math regardless of OEM 1, 2, and 3. The whole industry will pick their own applications for their own brands. And that's kind of a key thing for understanding from an infrastructure perspective. But it all comes out of the same data that's provided, which is the SAE J2735 message sets, which are information about the signals and traffic control.
Okay.
Well, Chair, we are working with another group as well, GENIVI, which I believe stands for Generic Infotainment Information, in-vehicle infotainment. And the infotainment system, you guys all know, is all the information that the driver gets. But we're working with them to develop a way of truly having some more V2I communication, where we are sharing with drivers who have this technology where there are transit stops, where there are most likely to be pedestrian activity related to those transit stops, where there are high risk areas for pedestrians, as well as the speed of giving an alert to the driver as to what the speed limit is and when they're exceeding that speed limit. There's a lot of times you're driving and you don't even know what the speed limit is along that road. So knowing that also makes you a safer, more alert driver.
Do you envision a future in which you, as the general manager, say, autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles can't speed in my jurisdiction? How far off is that?
That wouldn't be in my purview. That would be more of a federal or DOT, Department of Transportation type level.
One of the Brad mentioned data. One of the things that's going on right now at the federal level is legislation that will allow greater deployment of autonomous fleets. And I think I'm the vice president of NACDO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And one of the things that we've been really concerned about is federal preemption and what data is going to be made available to cities. And I think in the absence of understanding how this technology works and how the services are going to get deployed, our inclination is to want to hoover up all this data that we may or may not even know how to use. Mm-hmm. So for you guys, if safety is our #1 priority as city DOT officials, what's the data that you think we should be asking for so that we can have a more focused ask?
I think the obvious things are the data that surrounds the traffic flow, the congestion, the pinch points where things are breaking down, where there's accidents, even to the point where there's a black ice that the car can detect or a pothole that emerged. Maybe not black ice in Las Vegas,
right.
But things like that could cause real safety problems for cities. I mean, data in the end is a great big word, and data is what's economically driving a lot of the companies, as we've talked about today, to get into this field, and it's a real opportunity. And I think the effort now needs to be, what is it the data that really works for a city like Seattle or Las Vegas or others? What do they really need? How can it be used to ensure there's equity for access to transportation that can improve what we have today with our systems?
I'll share with you, one of the other things we have going on is another pilot program where it's actually predictive analysis using meteorological data, using historical data, time of day, season of the year. We even consider what types of conventions are in town and aggregating the data and doing predictive to the extent that we can as to where the next accident might happen. And what that allows us to do is to station emergency response, or just put emergency response and tow trucks on heightened alert during certain times of the day so that we can react to and clear accidents more quickly than we otherwise would. And we're only about 3 months into the pilot program, and it's already, our staff loves it. They absolutely love it, because when something does happen, we're also using ways, or we're using crowdsourcing to give us feedback, to give us immediate understanding as to what's going on the roads, and that alerts us that much more quicker, and we can turn our cameras onto where this accident has happened, and even before that 911 calls in, we've already got responders out there.
Oh, wow.
The faster you can clear, think about it, an accident's a terrible thing, but really all that it is, I mean, to most of us, is just a congestion problem, right? It's just you've taken up a lane or two of capacity. So the quicker we can clear that out, the faster we have given the taxpayers back the capacity that they've paid for.
Do you see, with these connected vehicles, are you also looking at for the Audi Prime members using that data for when they're starting to slow down to actually beat 911 to the punch?
Oh, yeah. So the relationship with Audi and any other future manufacturer that we have will be we will share data. Yeah. They'll understand our system more, but we'll also get feedback as to what's going on with their drivers and how our roads are being used by their drivers.
So this isn't...
And it's all anonymized. So.
This is not entirely panel business. This might be after panel, but I want to connect my staff with yours. We have... There's some of the research that we have in Washington State is that about 25% of the congestion on the regional network is due to crashes, and that from a safety perspective, you actually get, as you get one crash actually has a cascade effect where you start seeing other crashes as well. So it's a congestion benefit and a safety benefit.
So for our first month, when we turned on, we analyzed about 100,000 crossings in the greater Las Vegas area. And one of the metrics that we're looking at is the speed arriving into the intersection. So what are those vehicles? How fast are they on both green and red? And now using that as a metric moving forward, that now with different implementations or policy decisions, that we have a metric of these vehicles, connected vehicles, of what they've experienced through the intersections.
Are we seeing speeds like increase as the light turns yellow? Oh, light's yellow, faster.
Well, the good thing about the Audi system is that if you attempt to speed, you lose the information in front of you.
Really?
So that's a responsibility that Audi has taken upon with your data to make sure that the system is being used in a responsible manner.
So what are some of the investments that you think cities should be thinking about right now, making right now, and sort of what are some of the things that we ought to be holding off on?
I could start from a very technical perspective. I'm an engineer, by the way, so from the marketing background is somewhat new. But when we look across the country, right now we've inventoried 200,000 signalized intersections. Southern Nevada has about 1,400 of them. Now, that 200,000 isn't all our product right now, but the potential there is about 55%. So from our perspective, to do what we do in a cellular type of delivery, we need connectivity, which is also a basis of creating a backbone for any type of other technologies that go in. So we need to connect the rest of the signals from traffic control's perspective into the central systems and start with that.
Right.
And then from there, it's policy decisions on open data portal so that Vegas has a very good open data policy that we were able to come in right away, use the data in really from the point that we started a month before we were delivering a product out in the field. And so as soon as other cities have open data portals with the same real-time information, then we can produce these type of safety benefits from that data.
I think it's an entirely new paradigm for cities, and in that traditionally it's going to be hard for us because we've always gone into relationships with vendors and private sector with a slight level of distrust or suspicion, because they're profit motivated, and so we always want to be guarding and making sure we're not being taken advantage of in terms of our taxpayer assets, our public assets. But there's going to have to be some risk involved, and you are going to have to be forward thinking in recognizing you have to have these relationships where you're sharing data, where you have a common goal and a common vision to deploy this stuff, because public sector on their own will never be able to come up with all of the technology solutions that private sector is going to come up with in the automotive industry. So we have to shift our culture to really kind of start to ease up on some of our very strict procurement processes, to be flexible in pilots and demonstrations so that we can test this stuff, deploy it, and in the end really offer more capacity than we would have been able to otherwise. I like saying that technology is the new asphalt. There are certain corridors where we can never build enough lanes, or we don't have the right of way to build more lanes, and the only way we're going to get more capacity out of that asphalt, or existing asphalt, is through technology. So it's kind of but to get to that technology, we're going to have to go into partnership agreements where we normally haven't done.
Okay. I think at the same time, Scott, that technology can be a sort of a glittering risk, right? I mean, you see stuff happening. Cities can rush out and invest significantly in technology and then find out 6 months, a year later, it's obsolete or it's kind of a dead-end technology. Just as an example, I think the debate between DSRC and what 5G could offer in the future for connected vehicles is still kind of an open debate. And so this is where I get back to the point where industry, innovators, tech companies, and cities need to work together to understand really what's coming when, so you're not blindsided or drawn into investing in something that might not work out long term.
So this is a little bit of an open-ended one, and maybe it's for folks in the audience to think about as well. Is one of the things that we've done recently in the city of Seattle is we've tried to move away from this procurement model and move more into a permitting approach. We had a bike sharing system that failed epically, which was fun to go through. But we essentially rose out of it and we said, well, we still want bike share, but we just can't procure it. So we permitted it. And we had a bunch of companies that were venture backed come and drop bikes in our city, and it's working great. We've taken a similar approach to electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the right-of-way, where we've essentially created a permitting structure to allow EV charging infrastructure to be put into the city. We're not going to invest cash in it, but we're going to invest right-of-way. And so as we're thinking about connected vehicles and all the safety benefits that they can bring, are there applications, and you don't need to answer yes or no now, but if you have some thoughts, give them. Are there applications where that permitting approach might actually make sense for connected and autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to be presented the exact scenario, but yeah, I like your idea of just doing permitting as opposed to exclusive procurement.
Yeah.
I think you raised an important one with charging, right? Because as we get into a world where the automated vehicle is shared and electric, you're going to need a lot more charging hubs, if you will, for these vehicles to charge. And whether that's done by a permitting process, it might make sense to future-proof the technology for charging alone.
Right.
From a traffic control perspective, the permitting might not apply for what we're actually getting. So having the open data policies already in place and making sure that the data is available. We start with an agreement very similar to what Waze does. And even with Waze, that takes a very long time in multiple review stages of legal and just various departments of the city. So having something off the shelf, ready to go, open data, that'd be the solution.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys very much. We're a little bit over time, but thank you very much.